What's up? So, I want to talk about EV charging and some interesting developments that have taken place over the past week. But if we go back to my last video and podcast, I talked about EV range anxiety not being a thing. And I still believe that. Now, I saw some interesting feedback about that video and podcast, and many of you don't think EV range anxiety is a thing, but the EV charging experience could be improved, of course. Now, another interesting thing that I noticed is that there was a lot of interest in Mazda USA CEO Jeffrey Guyton's comments that longer range EVs in his mind will not be the future of EVs. So really looking at shifting how we use our EVs or how we use our vehicles overall. So quite interesting, and let's sort of see where that goes. I gave my impressions about sort of how I would use an EV in my day-to-day usage and what I think the optimal range is. So if you haven't seen that video, definitely check that out. Now, let's get to today's topic. So, what's the big news? So, the big news is that the Biden administration last week announced their new rules for an EV charging network in the US. Now, this has been fairly long in the making, about 8 months, and as of last week, they announced their new EV charging rules for the US. And what that is a nationwide network of 500,000 EV chargers. That's right. So about 500,000 EV chargers by 2030. Now, what's driving this massive rollout of EV chargers? Well, the Biden administration's goal is to transition to 50% of new vehicle sales in the US by 2030 being EVs. And in order to do that, the infrastructure is needed to support electric vehicles. So I want to talk about that today. Now, the current state of affairs is that there are about 130,000 EV chargers across the US right now. And that's not really sufficient for the growth of EVs that the US has experienced over the past 2 years. So we saw last year a 6% increase in EV sales as of last year in the US nationwide. Now, in the state of California, that was a 19% increase in new vehicle sales being EVs. So the infrastructure is obviously needed to be able to support this acceleration of EV sales in the US and ultimately a transition from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. So let's look at what the rules entail. Well, first, in order for this rollout to happen, there's one key requirement that EV charging manufacturers or operators must comply with. First is that the EV chargers must use what's called the Common Charging Standard, or CCS, and that's currently the predominant standard in the US right now. Now, if you're a Tesla owner, you know that Tesla doesn't use CCS. They use a proprietary connector for their vehicles. So there's some really interesting things sort of to consider as it relates to these new rules from Biden, and I'll get into Tesla a little bit later in this video and what these new rules mean for Tesla. Okay, so the CCS standard is a requirement. So for charging manufacturers, for like ChargePoint, which has 50,000 EV chargers installed nationwide at 29,000 charging stations, they already have the CCS connector available at their stations. EVgo has about 29,000 charging stations nationwide as well, and they have 1,900 fast chargers nationwide, and they support the CCS standard. And then there's Electrify America, who also has about 3,500 EV charging locations nationwide, and they support the CCS standard. So it won't be a problem for these particular EV operators to be able to comply with the Biden administration's mandate for EV charging. Now, there's another key component. Well, in order to qualify for the National EV Charging Network, there must be interoperability. And what does that mean? Well, EV chargers must offer a variety of payment types so that people can charge their EVs however they wish with whatever form of payment they wish. And so if you're charging in California, that experience should be much the same as it is in Florida, Texas, New York, and so on. And so that's really a key component. And again, interoperability to be part of the National EV Charging Network. EV charging manufacturers and operators like the ones that I named previously must offer a flexibility with the types of payments that they support for their EV charging stations. Okay, now I talked about sort of the interoperability and then the charging connector type. Well, what's behind this? Well, the key thing is that EV charging manufacturers and operators are eligible for a $7.5 billion subsidy from the Biden administration to roll out this EV charging network. So if your ChargePoint, EVgo, Electrify America, in order to expand your network, that means that you must comply with, again, the interoperability rules as well as the connector type rules. And the benefit is to get some subsidy from the federal government in order to really promote expansion of the EV charging network across the U.S. So this is a huge opportunity for these EV charging station operators, and for a large operator like EVgo or ChargePoint, there's some real big opportunities here to be able to really expand their presence across the U.S. Now, the final rule of the Biden administration National EV Charging Network is the actual manufacture of the EV chargers. And so what that means, or what the requirements are, is that the EV chargers by July 1st, 2023, this year, they must be made from 25% American-made components. And so that's really a big deal as it relates to being able to deploy EV chargers and also really be qualified for the Biden administration subsidy for the National EV Charging Network. Now, 25% American-made components, that's one thing, but then it transitions to 50% American-made components by January 1st, 2024. So this is quite a hard requirement and does require EV charging manufacturers to really look at their supply chains in order to be able to meet these requirements and their timelines. Now, we've heard lots of things about the supply chain as it relates to tech companies, EV manufacturers, and just even legacy auto manufacturers. And so what does this mean for EV charging manufacturers? So certainly they'll have to rethink about their footprint as it relates to manufacture and obviously the composition of their EV chargers to qualify for the National EV Charging Network rules. Okay, now the commentary is that this is a very aggressive timeline according to the Department of Transportation and Tesla as well. So let's get into that component as it relates to Tesla. Well, Tesla operates its own proprietary charging network, and that includes Destination Charger and Supercharger. There are about 35,000 destination chargers nationwide in the US, and then there's also 17,000 superchargers, the fast charger type, in the US. So there's really a lot at stake for Tesla as it relates to the Biden administration's rules for a national EV charging network. For Tesla, they currently sort of offer this value-added experience for Tesla owners where there is sort of the Tesla vehicles and then the supercharger network that's exclusive for Tesla vehicles. Now, in Europe, Tesla is gradually opening up their network to other EV auto manufacturers to be able to charge their vehicles, but that is not currently the case in the US. So Tesla's caught in quite an interesting position. The value add and really a unique competitive advantage by offering Destination Charger and Supercharger to Tesla owners versus the Biden administration rules. Well, Tesla has made the business case, and they have decided that they're going to comply with the Biden administration's rules for the National EV Charging Network. And if you check out the Clean Earth Energy website, there is a topic on that as it relates to Elon Musk's recent meeting with the Biden administration about accelerating the transition to EVs and what are sort of Tesla's ideas and what are their proposals for accelerating the transition to EVs. So here we are. Tesla has decided that they're going to open up their network. Now, if you're a Tesla fan, you might not be happy with that, or you might feel some concerns about that. But I don't think it's really a big deal or a lot to worry about. And why is that? Well, Tesla offers the largest number of superchargers nationwide. And so this is an opportunity for them to be able to expand their EV charging network across the US at no cost to them. Sorry, at modest cost to them, or an offset cost to them, I should say. It also really puts them in a sort of very competitively challenging position where the other EV operators, as I mentioned earlier, like ChargePoint and EVgo, they're going to be eligible for that subsidy because they support the CCS standard. And if they comply with the American manufacturer requirements as well, they'll have an opportunity to expand their networks with the support of the government, whereas Tesla, if they don't comply, would not. And so in order for Tesla to expand, they would obviously have to shoulder that cost. And Tesla has evaluated the business case and decided they're going to comply. Now, what does that mean? Tesla is going to retrofit up to 8,000 of its superchargers, its DC fast chargers, and its destination chargers. And that retrofit will include support for the CCS standard, as well as interoperability as it relates to payments, being able to support a variety of payment types. Now, what does it mean for Tesla? As I mentioned the expansion earlier, but it is an opportunity to provide unique value-added services to Tesla owners that may not be available to other EV owners. And it's also an opportunity for them to create another revenue stream by opening up the network to other EV auto brands. And so there is some opportunity here, especially in an environment where it's becoming increasingly competitive for EVs. There are a lot of challengers to Tesla, whether people agree or disagree. And this is an opportunity for Tesla to be able to really benefit from the sort of expansion or acceleration to EVs, electric vehicles, while at the same time being able to also sort of offset any particular sort of market sort of forces that may sort of impact the sales of their current vehicles. So that is a very unique opportunity for Tesla. And Tesla has made the evaluation, has decided that it is worthwhile for them to comply with the Biden administration EV rules. Okay, so those are the two big news components. Now, before I get on to the next thing, if you're still checking out this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons because you're really supporting what we do here at Clean Earth Energy. Also, check out our website. Weekly, we produce countless articles as it relates to clean energy, sustainability, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. And so be sure to check us out and follow us. Really appreciate it. Okay, so now let's get on to the actual sort of EV charging experience and what's driving a lot of this activity right now. Well, there was a survey by the J.D. Power EV ownership experience. And in that report, what they reported is that there's really sort of a 72% satisfaction rate from EV owners as it relates to the EV charging experience. And one of the key sort of findings in it is that 1 in 5 EV drivers has experienced unsuccessful attempts at charging their EV. And that's really a very high number, talking about 20% of EV drivers not being able to charge their vehicles when they want. Okay, but there's some other metrics to consider as well. And so let's look at California, Texas, and the state of Washington. These states have the highest density of EV ownership. And so in the survey, the EV owners in those states really reported the highest level of dissatisfaction with EV charging. And why is that? Well, with the density and the populations in states like California and Texas, there are many people competing for limited resources to charge their EVs, or there's simply not enough resources to charge their EVs, and then reliability is the key thing. And so there's really a lot of opportunity to improve that experience in those particular states. And so you have issues as it relates to reliability and availability in those states. But if we move over to the east, states like Iowa, Kansas, and Minnesota report a very high level of satisfaction with EV charging availability. And so those states have much less density, and there's probably a different sort of set of use cases for how EV owners use their vehicles. And so therefore, and also the number of EVs in those particular states certainly shift the impressions from EV owners where the availability is acceptable in those particular states. And so, really, quite a contrast between the western states and then over to sort of the Mountain West, Kansas, and Iowa and Minnesota. Now, if we move further east, if we look at states like Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana, they have a high satisfaction rate with the actual condition of the EV chargers, meaning the EV chargers are not broken and they're not vandalized, and that more or less that they work when people expect them to work. So in those states, Midwest states over to the east, there's a lot of satisfaction with the actual condition. And if you're an EV owner, you know what I'm talking about. You go to many of these EV charging stations and there are broken components or stations that just don't work, and that's a big problem. Now, let's look at something else. With it, as it relates to availability and reliability, imagine your electric vehicle having a minimal amount of range, and you find an EV charging station and the station is inoperable. Perhaps that driver is not close enough to another station to be able to charge their vehicle. So availability is a big issue. Reliability is a big issue. There's also a safety concern as well. In a similar scenario, what if there are severe weather conditions? What if it's late at night? And an EV driver has a minimal amount of range, and they are really dependent on that one EV charging station that they have identified, and that EV charger is not available. And that's either again due to it being broken or being able to unsuccessfully charge the vehicle. And so there are some real huge implications as it relates to the current state of EV charging in America. So some other quick facts. Also, by and large, about 2/3 of EV owners are satisfied with the EV charging station, EV charging experience nationwide. That's across the U.S. So I mentioned the various regions of the country, but overall 63%. That's just simply not good enough. Now, the highest level of satisfaction is from EV owners who charge using ultra-fast DC charging, and so there's generally a pretty favorable experience. Why is that? Well, you're able to find a charger, you're able to connect successfully to it, and charge your vehicle quickly. Not so much for the level 2 case. However, the level 2 charging experience is most favorable in places where it is most convenient. So say your local shopping center or at a Whole Foods or IKEA. And so EV owners have reported quite favorable experiences for the convenience as it relates to level 2 charging. Now, for Tesla owners probably already know this. I'm not saying anything new, but the EV charging experience is much higher for EV owners who charge on Tesla's Supercharger or Destination Chargers, roughly a 73% satisfaction rate, with Supercharger garnering a 74% satisfaction rate. And so we see really where Tesla, again, with this complementary experience between their vehicles and Supercharger and Destination Charger, are really able to deliver quite a favorable experience comparatively versus non-Tesla EV charging station operators. And so that's really where we are with this. Now, if we look at gas stations, there are gas stations on almost every corner in highly dense areas, even in some of the suburbs. Some gas stations are next to each other. Some stations are across the street from each other. And so there is no problem there. And it should not be any different for an EV owner. And what we're looking at as well is, as we look at this transition to electrification, the number of EV charging stations need to increase while the number of gas stations need to decrease. And so that's a really big driver behind the Biden administration's rules, and obviously giving the EV charging station operators and manufacturers real incentive to expand their networks. And so the final thing that I want to cover overall as it relates to the EV charging experience is sort of where we are with the numbers. And so right now, EVs in the US represent 0.7% of the number of vehicles on the road nationwide. That's about 1.9 million vehicles on the road right now versus 281 million vehicles overall inside the US. So still a relatively small number, but growing rapidly. Now, according to SAP, they're looking at, SAP Global Outlook report, they're predicting that by 2030, there will be 28 million EVs on the road. And what that means is, in order to support that, is that there will need to be 700,000 EV charging stations inside the US to support that number of EVs on the road. Now, other analysts have the number at around 1.2 million EV charging stations that are needed. So right now, where we are with 130,000 EV charging stations currently available, the Biden National EV Network initiative is targeting 500,000 EV stations by 2030. And so we're looking somewhere in roughly the ballpark of 700,000 EV stations nationwide, upwards to 1.2 million. So let's see where we are with this. It's a very aggressive timeline, and there is some pushback, but I think it's better to have a timeline and a target in order to be able to deliver the number of EV charging stations that are needed to support the real rapid increase of EVs. Now, I talked about the US. Also, there is Germany, and recently Mercedes-Benz CEO and Volkswagen CEO have really petitioned to the German government that there needs to be a rapid EV charger rollout expansion there. And so, again, you have a similar situation where rapid sort of transition and increase in sales in EVs, and the infrastructure is simply not there. So this is becoming a problem in many parts of the world, particularly in developed economies. And so let's see where we really end up with this. So that's what I wanted to bring to you today. Thanks for checking out this video. Now, the key thing is, if you're an EV owner or non-EV owner, is please leave your comments about your experience, where you can see some opportunities, where things can be improved, because I think it's very important to have a conversation about this and really get a real sense of what the EV charging landscape is like currently, and where do you think it should be. And if you're a non-EV owner, would that really influence your decision to purchase an EV, to know that there is a target and that there's a proposal for an EV owner to really be able to reliably charge their EVs across the US? And other things to consider: how you use your vehicle in your day-to-day, as well as how you would use your vehicle on a road trip. So let me know, leave your comments below. If you're watching this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening to this on Google, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to follow and also like this as well. So my name is Mark Weich. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.